Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Home Video Library. I'm your host Nathan P. Butler. This time we are looking at something a little weird. When we think of Star Wars on home video, we tend to think of the primary formats of VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. Now we might throw in Laserdisc into that, and if you really were a big, Star Wars fan in the 80s, you might toss in Betamax. But very rarely do we think of a long-dead format known as the CED. The Capacitance Electronic Disc. This was something that was developed by RCA back in the late 70s that did become a home format, albeit one that really didn't have the capabilities of things like recording, so it kind of died thanks to things like VHS being out there. But it was sort of a bargain format in many ways compared to later things like Laserdisc. The original films on this format tended to come out around the $30-ish price point, so not nearly the $80, for instance, that the early A New Hope releases came out in. But these are a little bit weird. They look like giant computer discs, but they're not. They're a little bit more like old school LPs. That's right, kiddies. Before digital, there was CDs, and before CDs, there were tapes, and before tapes, there were 8-tracks, and before that, LPs. That's right, the black records, only this time, not for audio, but for video, which is a little weird. Now, these look a little odd. Bear with me here. I will show you exactly how this works here momentarily. This is the 1982 CBS Fox release. There's another one marked as a 20th Century Fox video, came out right before the merger or the name change, whatever you want to call it. This is the CED in stereo, woohoo, of Star Wars, aka A New Hope. Now, this whole thing looks like a big computer disk, very, very thin. Similar information, notice mine's got a lot of, crap on it and stuff like that at this point. Not actual crap, but discoloration and whatnot, just because of time and such. But this is a capacitance electronic disc. You have a CED player, as it's called, and you slide it into it. Or excuse me, you slide it in the other way. It's a little bit different than a disc. The rounded edges is actually the part you hold. And you slide it in, so this top part that's got kind of like a part that looks like it folds, we'll see in a minute, slides into the player. And then you pull this back out, and then it plays. Ha! We'll get to it. All right, in 1984, you had the release of The Empire Strikes Back on the same format. Now, you notice in this case, the top here is white. Okay, these caddies, as they're called, the plastic covering, could come in blue, could come in white. Not a lot of rhyme or reason to it, and sometimes you saw releases on both, just depending on when you happen to buy them. So, Empire Strikes Back, okay, similar thing, also in stereo, similar back to what we saw on the back of the 1984 VHS release. Return of the Jedi is a little bit different. You see, these things have a runtime of 60 minutes per side. It is double-sided. Actually says up the top, side 1 or side 2. So when you were going to play one of these, you did have to flip sides halfway through the movie, and since these movies are a little bit more than actually 2 hours long, they had to compress it. They time compressed it so it's sped up by pulling out some frames. I think it's like 2-point-something% faster than a regular viewing of the film. In the case of Return of the Jedi, a little bit different. They actually released it across 2 different CEDs, better picture quality and whatnot, very late in the life cycle of the CED player before it just completely went off the market. In that case, the CED, again, CBS Fox, it says 20th Century Fox down at the bottom in this case, it's noted there as Part 1 stereo, and similar back to the 86 and after 86 VHS release. But then you also have your Part 2, essentially identical, just saying Part 2 down here on the bottom, that has your information there, again, on the back. Now, the question is, how do these actually work, and why am I making comparison to LPs? Now, I don't have a CED player. To open this, there's these little ends that have a prong inside it. Because when you push it into the player, it presses those prongs. It grabs this part of it, and when you pull it back out, this part, the actual caddy, they sometimes call it, this part stays inside the machine to play. And when it's time to take it back out, you slide the rest of it in, it clamps back down, and you pull the whole thing back out. It's a really strange scenario here. Now, to open this, there's a tried and true method here of using pen caps, because you have to essentially unlock both sides. Oh, and see, I just managed to relock it on myself. It's a real pain in the butt. You're supposed to do it with an actual CED player, but I don't have one of those. Okay, so it's popped. So I put it in the player, and out comes this. Okay? This is a CED. There's no label on it. It's basically what amounts to an LP. It works with a needle, the same way that an LP does to produce music. Notice it just immediately clamps back in as soon as I put it back down. This was a strange format in which to buy it, but it was much cheaper than VHS or Betamax at the time. So if you had a CED player, you could buy the whole trilogy significantly cheaper than you would if you were to buy them on VHS or Betamax. That was the plus. Granted, not a lot of people had the players relative to VHS and Betamax players, and those formats would last a much longer time. But if you're someone living in the 70s, going into the 80s, you really want to see them, and here comes these releases, and you want to be able to get them on a budget, CED was the way to go. Unfortunately, or fortunately perhaps, there's never such a thing as a boxed set of these. Understand the weight of these things is pretty hefty. I wouldn't even have wanted to see a box set of these. It would have been, heavy enough that reminds me of that newspaper strips collection that has the 3 volumes by Williamson and Goodwin, or Williamson, there you go, and Goodwin put together. It's a heavy load here to be able to see the films. So not something that you're going to pick up to actually watch these days. Chances are you've probably never seen a CED player. I sure haven't. But they are out there. They're usually found pretty cheap on places like eBay because, let's face it, there's not a huge demand for them. Nifty little thing to add to a collection, but bear in mind it's one you're probably not going to get much in the way of use out of. With that, we wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the home video viewers.